So was that amazing to hear all those different remarks about parents? So I want to say thank you to all our young people for indeed sharing that with us. Really do appreciate it. So I want to look at the fifth commandment, honour your father and your mother. God spends the first four commandments saying it's all about me. He tells us four things: to put him first, don't misrepresent him, don't misuse his name, take one day off a week and give it to him. And now he begins to talk about us and the people around us. First four commandments deal with our relationship to God and with God. The next six commandments deal with our relationship to others around us. And it's really important to notice that when we have a right relationship with God, then all our other relationships will flow out of that and from that one thing. When I initially looked at the fifth commandment, I thought it would be pretty straightforward and easy. But then I looked a bit more deeply at it. The issues that it has raised and the issues that I have saw in it have been very challenging. And folks, I want to say this to you at the outset. It is a tough commandment if we really desire to live it out. Did you know that your parents had been your age once, but you have not been their age? Now think about that statement. Because sometimes we think we know better than our parents. And when your parents were your age, they probably thought they knew better than their parents. But it's always important to remember that experience in life brings much wisdom. So isn't it true that our attitudes to our parents need to be brought into line with this fifth commandment today that God has given us? Proverbs 13 and verse 1 says this: a wise son, a wise daughter heeds their father's instructions, but a mocker does not respond to rebukes. So the question, why did God give us this command to honour our parents? Parents are very imperfect people. Some of you have had lovely parents and really good and secure, loving, wonderful relationships with them. But even the best parents have sinned, made mistakes, have faults and failures. The challenge of this commandment is this: how do we honour our parents when our parents' expectations are maybe out of line, that you feel you can't live up maybe to their expectations? Some of you have or have had parents who were very difficult, or who may even have manipulated, abused, or even been neglectful. Some have been continually critical of your appearance, your choice of career, your partner, how you raise your children, and how often you call or visit them. And it's because parents are so imperfect, God commands us to honour them, because left to ourselves we may not, would not, could not. It is in our homes that we learn respect for people and for authority first of all. And isn't it true that in today's society we've lost respect for so many things, and indeed for so many people, because maybe we haven't learned it in our homes. Our first human relationships is in our family, which shape every other relationship in our lives. Sometimes we treat our own parents the worst instead of the best. A boy presented his mother with a bill, and it read like this: hoovering the lounge, £1. Washing up, £1. Taking the rubbish out, £1. Total bill, £3, which he submitted to his mum. So the mother gave the son a bill: washing and ironing all your clothes for 10 years, £2,000. Buying and preparing all your meals, £2,000. Nursing you day and night for 3 months when you were sick, £3,000. Total bill, I love you. Now I like that. How you and I treat people inside our own homes will shape how we treat every other person you meet at school, at work, socially. Children learn about others first by learning about their own family, and then they apply that knowledge to other people. So here's the question: how am I to honour my parents? Well, it depends on what stage of life you're in. You apply this command differently at each stage of your life. But the first thing that I want to say this morning is this: as a child, I honour parents by obeying and respecting them. The reading that we had this morning from Colossians 3, verse 20, children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Now, I could just see parents are smiling now and saying, thank you, Lord, for that verse. But this command applies as long as you're under your parents' roof, as long as they're providing for you and you are dependent upon them. God says you are to obey them. That pleases Him. It brings pleasure to God's heart and a smile to God's eyes. We all know that Jesus was once a child who knew more than his mother, and he knew more than his stepfather Joseph, yet he obeyed them. There's a real breakdown in respect and obedience in our society, because there is a real breakdown of respect and obedience in many homes in our society today. So this commandment works both ways. It says that children have a duty to honour their parents, but parents need to earn the right to be honoured. There were children who were shouting in their bedroom, and the mother rushed in and said, "What are you quarrelling about?" And the children said, "We're not quarrelling, we're just playing Mummy and Daddy." Now, one of the best ways to correct children is to correct the example that we are setting them. One other mother said regarding her teenage daughter, "She's very independent. She lives alone at our house." One teenager said, "Home is the place where you can say whatever you want because no one will be listening to you anyway." Isn't that sad? As a young person, I honour my parents by accepting them and appreciating them. And it is true that sometimes teenagers are so often embarrassed by their parents too. They say, "When my friends come around, please don't say anything, you'll embarrass me." We accept our parents when we realise what we owe them. God has used them to bring us into this world, no matter how poor they have been as parents, regardless of how well, badly you feel they've treated you, you owe them your life. And God chose to use them to bring you and me into this world. Number 2, listen to what they have to say. Again, Proverbs 23 verse 22 says, "Listen to your father who gave you your life, and do not despise your mother when she is old." You can disagree with them without being disagreeable. Jesus' own mother Mary didn't always understand or approve of what he did, but he always honoured her even when he disagreed with her. Do you remember that incident in Luke chapter 2 verses 41 to 51 when Jesus is at the temple? I think in that passage we can see that Mary doesn't always understand her son. And you know, it's wonderful that the Bible doesn't hide the faults and the failings of the people that God uses. When you read through the Gospels, you'll notice that there are 3 occasions when Mary gets it wrong with Jesus, where she completely misunderstands her son. In Luke chapter 2 verses 41 to 51, Jesus at this stage is 12 years of age, and in Jewish society and culture, he was entering into manhood at this age. And so the family have gone down from Nazareth to the temple of Jerusalem, and they lose Jesus. After 3 days and nights of panic and endless searching for him, they find him in the temple. And then in Luke chapter 2 verse 48 it says, when his parents saw him, they were astonished. His mother said to him, "Son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you. Don't you know that we've been half out of our minds looking for you? Why were you searching for me?" Jesus said, "Didn't you know I had to be in my Father's house?" But they did not understand what he was saying. And within Mary herself, I'm sure there was a sense of relief that he was found safe and well, but at the same time a sense of frustration, confusion. We just don't get this. But Mary really hasn't understood her son. She hasn't understood who he is. She hasn't really grasped his mission, why he's here. And then in verse 51 it says this, "Then he went down to Nazareth with them and was obedient to them." But his mother treasured, pondered all these things in her heart. In other words, she is a mother who is working hard to understand her teenage son. She is trying to understand the enormous growth, the change that is taking place within him as he leaves childhood and as he moves into adolescence and manhood. And yes, even Mary struggled to understand her son. And verse 50 shows just how difficult she found it really. But they did not understand what he was saying to them. You see, Jesus is trying to express himself, but Mary's finding it really hard to understand. Folks, I want to say this. A lot of teenagers do not understand their parents, but parents often do not understand their teenagers. And you know how love is spelled for teenagers? I'm going to spell it for you. T-I-M-E. Time. If you love me, you will take time for me, time to listen, time to talk, time to understand. Third point, when we choose to forgive rather than to blame them. Tread carefully here, because I know that many have been hurt by demanding parents. Again, Proverbs 20 verse 20, if you curse your father or mother, the lamp of your life will be snuffed out. The bitterness in your heart will eventually eat into you and destroy you. And it's easy to focus on all the negative things, what our parents didn't do, how they failed us or hurt us. Focusing on the positives help us to accept them for who they are, not for how good they are or were. And that's how God loves us and treats us daily, isn't it? You can appreciate your parents, again, regardless of all they got wrong as parents. You can appreciate their effort. Parenting is difficult. It is time demanding, energy draining. It's a full-time job. And you can appreciate their sacrifice, and parenting is an expensive business. When a couple choose to have children, they choose to do it without lots of other things. Our parents work and save so that we could have what they didn't have. Children have no idea of the hours of effort, energy, time, thought, prayer, worry that parents pour into their children's lives without knowing it, realizing it, appreciating it. And number 4, as an adult, I honor my parents by affirming them in their old age. As parents grow older, they begin to feel so worthless or useless, less cared for, so lonely, maybe feel that they're a nuisance, they feel less valued. All of their friends who affirmed them and enjoyed them are perhaps maybe ill themselves, or some have died. They are no longer feeling needed or wanted or valued for their skills or wisdom in a work situation. Older parents need affirmed and valued, yet sometimes they can be so awkward, so difficult to love and to help. Sometimes they won't do something simple like get this or that put into the house that would make caring for them so much easier. How do you affirm aging parents as an adult? Well, by staying in touch with them, by maybe even writing a card, making a phone call, calling in to see them, by touching them, giving them a kiss. And I know that's very difficult in these days of restrictions, but apart from your touch, they may not receive it from anyone else all day. Do you know that this is the only commandment that does not last a lifetime? A day may come when we will not be able to make amends. It is tragic that some people give honour to their parents at funerals when it's too late, folks. No degree of expense put on a funeral is equal to a thank you, a visit, a phone call, a letter. While we have the opportunity, honour parents by affirming them now. The Apostle Paul says the way that we treat our older, elderly parents shows what kind of Christians we really are. In 1 Timothy chapter 5 verse 8 says, if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for his immediate family, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Provide, care for emotional needs as well as the practical needs. Isn't it amazing how the family cycle also goes round and the roles reverse? At one point your parents fed you, cared for you, took care of you, provided for you. And as they become elderly, the roles reverse. It may be that you will need to feed them or bathe them or care for them. And God says that is part of our care and our love and a part of being a Christian. How we juggle our aging parents' needs with our own responsibility, it's a complex problem. But it's important to offer some support and assistance in their old age. Again, 1 Timothy chapter 5 verse 4 says, but if a widow has children or grandchildren, These should learn first of all to put their religion into practice by caring for their own family and so repaying their parents and grandparents, for this is pleasing to God. So the question, isn't Jesus our model? There he is, in excruciating pain, dying for the sins of the whole world on the cross, and yet one of the things he does is not forget, even in this horrendous moment of his life, is to care for his aging mother. He says to one of the apostles, John, take care of my mother. He says it from the cross. Jesus sees his mother in pain as she stands with her sisters and Mary Magdalene watching Jesus die. It's a picture of Mary at one of the most painful times in her mother's life, as she stands and watches her eldest son go through mocking, humiliation, torture, her dying child, helpless through death on a cross for a crime that he didn't commit. And as she stands and watches her son, the son that she loves, broken, bleeding, dying, the most horrendous death on the cross. And even in the most agonizing moments of his life, Jesus is completely self-forgetting that he entrusts his mother into the protective care of the disciple John. And it's a reminder to us that mothers have invested so much into our lives as children. We can easily forget the hurt and the pain that they have gone through in bringing us up as children. And a word to those who have or have had a difficult relationship with a parent or parents. For some of you this morning, this message may have been painful. It may have raised some questions rather than answered some things. How do I honour a parent who is so difficult, so unreasonable, so demanding? How do I honour a parent who neglected or mistreated me for so many years? God is not asking you to gloss over the pain or deny that pain or repress the anger that you may feel. But he does want us to face the pain and go through the pain. If you cannot talk things out with your parents and try and resolve some of those issues that remain unresolved maybe in your life, then maybe sharing your pain with another Christian that you can trust may bring some practical relief. Folks, only God knows the pain that you feel. But God does know, and God does feel, and God does care for you. I love those words of Joseph, who's seeking to be reconciled to his brothers, who have caused him so much hurt and so much pain. And we've been studying that as we looked at the life of Moses or Joseph in our Bible study. Genesis chapter 50 verse 20 says this, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." And he reassured them and he spoke kindly to them. I want to say that God does recycle the pain we go through in our lives if we are willing to go through the process of handing it over to him. Our hearts, our lives, our pain, our relationships, the good things that have happened to us and the bad. Again, Romans 8 and 28 says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purposes." If you've had a good relationship with your parent or parents, that is something to be truly thankful to God for. It's lovely to have close family where people care and indeed are cared for. Our own children will learn from us, from watching how we honour and treat and care for our parents. How we treat our parents will become a model for how they will treat us. That's scary, but something worth thinking about. Obey this command, model it for your children, and also for the children within this church family, because we are family. Mark is going to lead us in our prayers this morning. So Mark,